a lot to cover in our hour today. So I just wanted to start off by welcoming everyone to the quarterly International PFD call. I think this has really grown. Interest in the call has grown, and it's great to see, and we're excited to have everybody here with us today. I just want to give a brief recap of today's presentation. So we'll be hearing from several folks. Number one, Chris Woodley, who's the Executive Director of Groundfish Forum, and he'll be talking about the Bristol Bay Reserve's PFD initiative in the wild sockeye salmon fishery. And just for the folks who are unaware, Bristol Bay Reserve is a member-owned marine insurance pool. And he'll be joined by Katie Enslow, who's the manager and CFO of the Bristol Bay Reserve, Jason Colhase, a commercial fisherman and longtime Bristol Bay Reserve board member, and then Darren Manor, who's owner and operator of drift gillnet vessels in Bristol Bay. And I believe that Darren is actually tuning in from his boat, which is even, which is pretty cool. So just wanted to thank all of you for your willingness to share your highlights from your PFD initiative. Another thing that I wanted to mention is, I don't know if you can see the list of attendees on the Zoom call, but one of them is just a little thumbnail that shows that the call is being recorded. And so I wanted to make people aware that we are recording this session. And the reason we're recording it is that for those people who could not make today's call, we can make that available to them so they can catch the presentation if they weren't able to join us today. So just a heads up that we are recording. The other thing I wanted to mention is I know Rebecca Weil has been emailing people in the International PFD group asking for contact information and a web link to your organization. And the reason she's been reaching out to people is we're hoping that we can use the iFish site as a way of keeping people up to date on the activities of this International PFD working group. And so what we need is for each of you on the call to confirm whether you're okay with us featuring your organization's web link on the International PFD working group section of the iFish website. So I will add Rebecca Weil's email address in the chat function of this Zoom call. So anyone who hasn't responded as to whether they're okay or not okay with adding your organization's web link, please just grab Rebecca's email and get back to her to let her know it's okay to use your web link on the iFish site. We won't be sharing people's contact information like email addresses. The only reason we've asked for that is so that we can share that internally for people who want to kind of connect with each other. So those would be people who attend these quarterly meeting sessions. Let's see, I think that's all for me. Beck, is there anything else that you wanted to mention, or did we?
That's it.
Okay, perfect. So I think I was going to turn it over to Jennifer, who wasn't quite sure she had anything to add.
Hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm so happy that folks could join the call again, and I'm really looking forward to this presentation from our Bristol Bay colleagues. I really don't have any updates for an international group. The various things that I thought of were more specific to the U.S., so I can send those through our the other ways that we communicate with our researchers in the U.S. So I'd really like to just give the time over, as Rebecca suggested at the top of the hour, that to talk about a couple of the success stories recently, and then we can get into our presentations.
Okay, perfect. So Beck, how about some happy news to start the call?
Well, we have two stories come to us, and then maybe more that all of you have, but we had a wonderful call from a fisherman who participated in our life jacket van project, who bought a Mustang for himself and his wife, and he wears them every day. He never wore them before, so he now wears them every day. And he just called the other day to tell us he was out in his skiff and it flipped and he got hit in the head with one of the oars, and he has this huge bruise, which he sent us a picture of. And he was really delighted that his PFD went off and he was fine. And that was just he was really happy. And he was actually in the car on his way to get a rearming unit. So that was great. And then we also heard from Frankie. I don't know if Frankie's on the call. Frankie, are you here? I'm not seeing. He not be, but Frankie sent us a wonderful link I can send around to people of a news story in the UK where someone went overboard wearing their life jacket, and it had a personal locating beacon, and he was in for 90 minutes and was found. And it's just a really great story of how successful it is to have a personal locating beacon and a life jacket, of course. But those are our two happy stories.
Wonderful. Thank you, Beck. So I just want to let folks know I have shared Rebecca Weil's email address in the chat bar. I'm going to stop sharing at this point so that Chris can bring up the PowerPoint that they've put together, the Bristol Bay Initiative. And then Chris, please let me know if you need any help with that.
Let's see here.
It looks perfect. Looks like it's working.
All right, you got the full screen going here?
Yeah, if you just click on presentation mode, I think.
There we go.
There we go. Perfect. All right. I'm going to put myself on mute, and I'll let all of you take it away.
Oh boy, it's showtime already. All right.
Yes.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Woodley, and I'm going to be your panel moderator today. I'm the Executive Director of Groundfish Forum, which is a fishing industry trade association that represents 19 trawl catcher processor vessels that harvest various flatfish, acca mackerel, rockfish, and Pacific cod in the federal fisheries off Alaska. For 30 years, I've been a vessel safety advocate for the commercial fishing industry, first in the U.S. Coast Guard, and then for the past 7 years as a board member for United Fishermen of Alaska and as the former chairman of the U.S. Coast Guard's Fishing Vessel Safety Advisory Committee. From my perspective, addressing the issue of man overboard, in one sense, should be quite easy. It's a perennial problem in numerous regions and fishing fleets across the country. Second, the technology to solve the problem, wearing of PFDs, the electronic wizardry involved in personal locator beacons, PML lights on the life jackets to notify rescuers and assist finding victims in the water is, it's not expensive, or it's not inexpensive, I should say, but it's readily available and easy to use. So solving man overboard should be a no-brainer, right? Problem is that it's not. It's a very, very difficult issue. Man overboard fatalities continue to be the second leading cause of fatalities across U.S. fisheries. And the problem isn't that people aren't aware that PFDs save lives or that they don't know that the equipment is out there. What I think it goes to much more is just the, I'll call it culture for lack of a better word, but it's a culture within individual fishing fleets and getting them to embrace this technology and the equipment that's out there. I'd argue that to solve the man overboard problem, it takes an understanding of the fishing fleet's culture and the specific workplace hazards, which varies across gear types and across fleets and across regions. It also requires integrating safety efforts into the existing institutions that fishermen are familiar with, rely upon, and accept. And it requires that safety purveyors such as safety training organizations, regulatory agencies, and academics meet fishermen where they are, which is to say where they work, where they live, and where they interact with each other. And lastly, it takes a lot of time. Safety culture does not change overnight, and a long-term commitment is necessary. So those are kind of some of the key things that we'll circle back to during our panel discussion. And I'd like to jump right into that because that's the most important part of what we're doing here today. So today we're fortunate to have an outstanding panel to discuss the Bristol Bay Reserve's effort to promote PFD use in Alaska's Bristol Bay drift gillnet sockeye salmon fishery. We've got Katie Enslow, Darren Maynor, and Jason Colhayes, all who've already been introduced. And so Katie, I think we're going to kick off with you. And if you could explain to the group what the Bristol Bay Reserve is and the PFD project that was developed for these fishermen.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having us. It looks like I'm off mute. Can you hear me all right? Yes? Okay, good. So I'll just get started really quick with a brief background on Bristol Bay Reserve. It's a marine insurance pool which is owned 100% by its members. Almost all of our members, which is about 350, participate in the Bristol Bay salmon driftnet fishery. Bristol Bay Reserve is governed by a 7-member board of directors, 2 of which are here with me today, Darren and Jason. And actually, Chris, would you mind going to the next slide?
Yep, hold on here. There we go.
Oh, one more. 2. Yeah, one more. Thank you. Let's see. So Bristol Bay Reserve is governed by a 7-member board of directors, all of which are Bristol Bay salmon fishermen. This puts our organization in a unique position, I think, to affect change, since we have fishery participants advising our staff directly on issues such as safety. Would you go to the next slide, Chris? And back there's a really cool picture of kind of what the fishery actually looks like, but we have several more photos later on in the presentation. As I mentioned, Bristol Bay Reserve insures about 350 vessels. This represents about 30% of this fishery. In 2019-2020, Bristol Bay Reserve put on a PFD incentive program. Basically, what we did was select one PFD, which helped us secure a bulk discount from Seattle Marine, and then offered it to our members for purchase. This was only offered to Bristol Bay Reserve members, but we sold 270 units, and there was about 25% participation. The Bristol Bay Reserve board members, who I mentioned are also Bristol Bay fishermen, they're the ones who selected the PFD so they could, kind of try it on, see if it was suitable for this fishery. From there, we sent out order forms to our membership and provided a further discount to their insurance premium. I think with this program, what was really cool is all our members had to do was fill out their form, send it back to us, and then their PFDs were just available for pickup once they arrived in Bristol Bay. They didn't even have to pay for these directly. We just threw it onto their insurance premium, and they just paid it all together. These units usually retail for about $228, but once we got the bulk discount and also provided our further incentive, which was $50 per unit, it came out to about $80 each. So I think this was pretty successful. We didn't have 100% participation, but it ended up being a lot more successful than we thought it was. And I think a big part of that was just making it really, really simple, having one option and having it really just right there, ready for them to pick up. And Bristol Bay, I should also mention, is a remote area of Alaska, so it's not incredibly easy to get things there. So that's a little bit of background. I will go ahead and give it back to you, Chris.
Okay. Thanks, Katie. So I'm flashing through the next slide here. So the next question I've got is regarding the fishery itself, and so Darren and then Jason, what I was hoping you could describe a little bit was, the time of year that this fishery occurs, how long the openers are, the types of vessels, the types of gear, and the number of participants. And I've got here is a great photo of fishing out in Bristol Bay. It's like watching the invasion of Normandy. There are so many boats out there and so many different types of vessels. It's really a remarkable thing to see. But Darren, can you and Jason, can you describe the fishery a little bit?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. So, yeah, Bristol Bay is the largest sockeye run in the world, salmon. We harvest pretty much this past year was historical. So we had a 63.2 million fish run, and we harvested 38.6 million fish. And that's done all within about a 30-day period. The openers are regulated based on escapement up the rivers, which is managed by Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And so we have about 1,350 vessels racing for fish. The openers really are dictated by escapement goals, and there are many times where it's just around the clock fishing in long hours, fast paced. We live on 32-foot boats. We have a crew size of around 3, including skipper, up to 5 or 6. And again, I think the big part of it is a race for fish. We don't have quotas; they're allocated to the vessels, so it's a Olympic system and becomes very competitive. So that's kind of the fast-paced environment, long hours, low sleep, and all living on a boat 24 hours a day together.
Hey, good morning, guys. It's Jason here. Darren, I'll just add to that a little bit, that within that 30-day window, you never quite know from hour to hour sometimes, or day to day, what your next fishing schedule is going to be like. And so we're always on call, and I think every minute or every hour of the day counts, which just kind of heightens that sense of urgency for our fishery. Lack of sleep and all of that goes into our decision making and our safety mitigations as well. And the other, I think, interesting aspect of this fishery is its demographics. It's probably the most diverse group of fishing captains and crew across the North Pacific. I mean, we've got people that are professional fishermen that work 12 months of the year on the water, and then we have folks that are professional medical doctors and lawyers and business executives that are coming in from around the country that come in for 4 to 6 weeks to participate. So it's an incredibly diverse group of people that are on the water. And when we talk about, Chris mentioned the culture, when we talk about trying to change the culture, especially with regards to safety, we're trying to educate people from very different backgrounds. They're not all like-minded or have the same experiences.
So either Darren or Jason, can you describe a little bit of the some of the safety hazards associated with the operations, and maybe also describe the different kinds of vessels that you see out there between the gill netters, the tenders, the fish processing vessels that you might deliver to, and then also trampers?
Sure, Chris. I'll start off a little bit. Pictures speak 1,000 words, and this picture here in front of you is a great example of some of the hazards that we associate with falling overboard or man overboard. It's I think Darren would agree. It's not just a general operation while you're working the nets and actually engaged in harvesting, but the process of the offload, which you see here, the gill netter tied next to the much larger tender vessel, and that interaction between the two vessels, I think, is inherently more dangerous than the actual fishing operation, because it forces the crew members to get to the edge of the boat and to operate and perform tasks and duties that are taking them to the edge of the boat, whereas when we're harvesting, you're more focused on more towards the middle of the vessel, if that makes sense. And so we're really looking at activities like this, and there was a photo earlier of an individual retrieving an anchor, and those activities are pretty inherently risky. A lot of these boats don't have very high rail systems on them, so a trip and fall over the side is significant, and operating within the weather patterns that we have. Here's a great photo of a net that's going to be set. He's throwing the buoy, and the net's going to be set loose off of the deck. And so if you can imagine, the cork line and lead line are going to be flailing out through off the back of the boat there, and there's an entanglement hazard that you could get sucked into the net and pulled overboard. So there's an inherent risk right there. these photos are showing pretty calm weather, but we're operating in pretty significant rough weather situations, and I think just that in itself is inherently risky. So there's a lot of different safety issues that we're concerned about with regards to man overboard.
All right, thanks, Jason. One last, I guess, follow-on question, and then maybe we could shift to the next topic, which is the, well, I guess it's two things. It's, what's the overall level of crew experience? Is this, I mean, do you have a lot of long-time people, or are there a lot of like younger folks that this may be their first time fishing? And then the second question is, how many overall participants are there in the fishery? I think Katie mentioned that there's about 1,200 vessels, but how many crew are typically on board a boat?
I'll go ahead and take that if you want, Jason. So you're in answer to your question on the boats, you're around 1,300, 1,350. Sometimes it'll float up to 1,400 vessel participants. Crew size ranges, you know, when we first started, it used to be just 3 of us with the skipper. Now we've, you know, some guys are growing upwards of 6. You know, as we said, it's production based, highly, you know, physical. There's not a lot of automation to get the fish out of the net. You're picking them out of a gill net. And the other question you had, Chris, was what?
Oh, just the like crew experience. Are these guys all like seasoned deckhands, or do you have a lot of new folks out there? Or... Well,
as Jason stated, it's very diverse. So I think a lot of it has to do with your contacts. We have crewmen that are year-round, you know, Bering Sea fishermen that take summers and come up. We have college students. We have family members. So you get a very diverse group of crew, and your skill set, you know, usually is dictated by the money that the fishery's having, or the success that it's had. And Bristol Bay's had successful years recently, and it's a short window. So what you find is a lot of people will come in for the 30 days and then go to other fisheries. So you benefit from that in some ways, but in other ways, you know, they come in with ideas of safety and some of these other things. So, you know, we kind of go through every year if you have returning crew, and I think most of us have been benefited from having crew that's been with us. You know, I've had some crew members who've been with me for 15 years, but then they move on. But so there's a turnover, definitely, and you have a very diverse, you know, crew complement and skill set. So it's pretty much from A to Z.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for painting the picture of what this. I'm going to flash through another couple of pictures here. Thanks for painting a picture of what this fishery looks like and its operation. So now, Katie, I'd like to jump to you. And given the you know, huge number of people and the diverse operations and the fact they're coming from all over the country with different skills and backgrounds and experience, how did you convince these guys that wearing PFDs, and when I say you, how did Bristol Bay Reserve convince these guys and women that wearing PFDs was a good thing? And how did you promote it?
Yeah, well, I think they all are kind of having to convince each other that wearing them is a good thing. But what we did in our program is, if you'll go back to the slide with the order form, I don't know that people will be able to read it, but on this right-hand side, the board of directors wrote a letter to our membership kind of explaining that man overboard is the leading cause of death in this fishery. And, you know, that's pretty unacceptable. So we provided some context. Hey, this is an issue. And I think, and then provided a solution at a good deal. I think fishermen like a good deal, and then made it really easy for them to actually purchase and pick up these units. But we did get a number of phone calls just thanking us even for kind of bringing this back to the top of people's minds that PFDs are something that they should be considering having on their vessels, like especially these newer, more slender designs. So I think that answers the question. Basically just reminded them that this is a serious hazard, and it's completely preventable from what we can see. So there you have it.
All right, thanks, Katie. So for Darren or Jason, as direct participants in the fishery, what do you see out there on or I guess what have you seen in terms of changes or acceptance of wearing PFDs? I mean, you know, the Bristol Bay Reserve initiative aside, do you see more people out there wearing them than you have before? And are there any other activities that occur within the Bristol Bay fishery, either recently or in the past, that have promoted PFD use?
Yeah, Chris. I'll just jump in, Darren. I think we talked yesterday, but this has been a slow process. The idea of engaging and embracing safety concerns in a fishery like Bristol, or in any fishery really, is a tough sell. And for whatever reason, fishermen, in one of my perspectives, is fishermen perceive safety initiatives as getting in the way of their efficiencies or profitability. And we kind of have to break some of these older attitudes or traditions that are out there. But yes, Bristol Bay in particular, I think we've seen a slow and steady increase in PFD acceptance and usage. And I think the number one reason, or probably the biggest effect to that, is just peer support, or I don't want to use peer pressure as a term, but people recognizing that we can be wearing PFDs, you can be seen wearing PFDs. You're not less macho because of it. You're able to produce as much fish. The guys are having deck loads of fish, and they're still wearing their PFDs. Honestly, just the visibility of the unit, of the PFD itself, it goes more to support the broader concept, I guess, than anything. And people would reckon, hey, I see you're wearing your PFD. That's awesome. Good job. I just think it's just a slow process. It's going to take a while, and we're right in the midst of it. You know, we're not mission accomplished here. Because we don't have 100% participation. Our initial incentive program was only 25%, so we've got a long way to go just with our own membership, let alone the rest of the fishery. But anecdotally, you are seeing significantly more PFDs now than you did before, and I think as long as people are continuing to wear them openly, other people will see them as being accepted, and you'll just kind of gain your numbers that way.
Thanks, Jason. Darren, do you have any more to add to that?
Yeah, I would. I agree with Jason. We as board members several years ago, he talks about the slow walk. We all tried out. I don't know how many years ago. Must have been 5 years ago. We tried the regatta flotation bibs and a bunch of those different PFDs on our vessels to kind of see what worked, and looked into it. And I started doing it with my crew. I think 10 years ago, I had them go up and buy whatever they would wear, and I started out on I paid for it and said just try wearing them, and we slowly evolved this for where we ended now. I mean, all of us had input on it, and the thing for me that stood out was when I had my crew wearing them, tendermen or other boats would comment and say, well, does it get in the way or does it not? And I think it was a slow, as Jason said, people seeing it visibly slowly changed their minds. And I had a situation where I had somebody run my boat for me when it was built up over into Bristol Bay from Homer. And they're part of the Old Believer Russian community that's very tight knit. And my son and crew were on the boat and they were wearing them. And I remember him telling me when he got up to Bristol Bay, he said, you know, I noticed your guys wearing them all the time and it didn't get in the way. And he goes, I ordered 3 and I'm going to have them this year. And I think a lot of that had to do with just observing it and not seeing it get in the way of their operations. So I think it's just continued exposure and slowly, hopefully we get to where it's more acceptable or more of it. And I'm seeing it up there. I see more and more people having them hanging on their hooks on the back of the house, knowing that they throw them on. I think one of the biggest things for us was, you know, if we can just get them to start wearing them when they go up and pull the anchor. And that's kind of where I think some of our focus was to start on that. And then it kind of grew from there.
If I can just add also really quickly, when we started this program, we worked really closely with Seattle Marine, and they have a location up in Bristol Bay. They prepared for other people who are not members of our program to also want to purchase PFDs. So they ordered a lot of extras. I don't know how many extras, but what I do know is that they sold out of this PFD at all of their locations after our program started. And they credit all of that to seeing the Bristol Bay Reserve members going and picking these up from their location in Naknek. They'd go picking them up in loads of 3 or 4. And once people saw them, they're like, hey, where are you getting these? Apparently I should have them, you know? So it was a little contagious, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Katie. That's that's to me, that's one of the most remarkable things that I've seen. It's not peer pressure, but it's almost the fear of missing out. It's when people, you know, when somebody leaves the store with 3 PFDs and somebody else is coming in and they're saying, I wonder if I should do that. And I think just that constant reinforcement, seeing them out on the ground, seeing that they don't interfere with the operations of the vessel is really, really good. So, well, I think we're at the end of our questions here. So for our panelists, is there anything else, Katie, Darren, or Jason, that you wanted to say or that you forgot you wanted to bring up?
No,
nope.
Good.
All right, great. Well, I think then that is the end of the panelist presentation. And so I think at this point, we should move on to questions, if that's all right, from the audience.
That would be great, Chris. And we actually have quite a few great questions that have come up in the chat function. So maybe if I could shoot those out and we could maybe tackle those. And then if people want, you can continue to add your questions in the chat function, or just take yourself off mute or raise your hand and I can, and I know that I see that Jennifer has already raised her hand. So, Jennifer, why don't you start off the question session and then I can fill in with questions from the chat.
Okay, I'm happy to, thanks. So Darren, I was thrilled that you mentioned the testing out those PFDs all those years ago. The regatta, interestingly enough, Ingun is on the call, and that was the regatta rain gear was one of the PFDs that we tested with Bristol Bay fishermen many years ago, and it was based on a research and development project that she led even before that. But anyway, my question really has to do with when we were interviewing fishermen in Bristol Bay, we also had gone to Dutch Harbor, Kodiak, Homer, and in Seward. And one of the things that really resonated with the group that was doing the interviews back then, this was originally in 2008 and 2009, was, and then again in 2014 and 2015, we really realized that the change that we saw an increase in PFD use certainly was with crab fishermen, operating out of Dutch Harbor. And we thought that that was really driven by vessel policies. So individual vessels making PFDs, making it a requirement, or even companies making PFDs a requirement. And so I'm wondering about the approach. I love the approach that you took of, asking members to buy these at a discounted price. And I'm wondering if you had considered, encouraging vessel owners to also pair that with a policy, but maybe that doesn't work with a small boat fishery like this. I'm just interested in that.
So I'll go ahead and Jason, you can chime in. I think we each operate independently and kind of set our own policies based on experiences. The 7 board members, I can't speak for all of them. For myself, it's evolved. And what I mean now is to the point where when I interview somebody, I explain what my policies are on the boat. And I pretty much have it. If you go through the door onto that deck and we're working, I want a PFD on. It's not a fireable offense. It's not, and if they're not comfortable with it, we talk about it. I've not had it yet to where somebody says I won't wear one. I do see it where my crew that's been with me, literally they'll come back in the cabin if they forget to put it on and put it on now, which is kind of an interesting observation I've had on that. So I think we each kind of dictate it differently. I know some other board members were, I don't know that it might get in the way of the movement of my crew. And they said, well, I just want them to wear it when they're pulling the anchor. And I think it's evolved for them too. So as far as policy, we've talked about that. And I think a big part, we've done other things as board members, and we found that incentivization seems to work far greater than mandates for us as a group. And so we've kind of adhered to that. And that was, I think, part of it, as well as the discount on the insurance. It almost made it a no-brainer, for lack of a better word, for them not to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Thanks.
Jason, did you want to respond?
No, I would just affirm what Darren just said with regards to the incentive. We've been very reluctant to be punitive with our members or become dictative and trying to respect everybody's individual operations and give them the choice, but support it as much as we can through incentive programs. And it's been, in our opinion, pretty successful in that way. So allowing people to develop their own policy instead of us dictating it to them in just respecting them as individual operators is important, I think, for us.
We do have a question here in the chat function, which is, I think, a good question for Jason or Darren. Do you haul the nets over the stern? We've got a technical operations question.
Yeah, so, sorry, Darren, if you, we mentioned the diversity of the demographics of the fleet. There's a significant diversity in the type of vessels that are out there, but primarily, yes. Most of the vessels set and retrieve their net off of the stern. There was a photograph of a crew member throwing a buoy off the stern. That's a pretty good example of how a net is deployed and retrieved. It goes off the stern through what we call stern rollers. So yes, that's pretty common mostly. There are some vessels that haul off of the front. They're called bow pickers, where the net's retrieved off of the front, but the majority of the fleet uses this stern method.
Great, thank you. I think another comment versus question, but I think it's a great comment. I know that somebody had mentioned that it looks like pretty cold water. And so Fred Matera had mentioned that Cold Water Boot Camp, which I believe is available on YouTube, is a great PR tool to incentivize crews. And I just wanted to back that up by I know that when we went to the Royal National Lifeboat Institute and met with Frankie and his team, they were talking about the race to rescue somebody and how it's a completely different scenario when someone has a life jacket, because you have a lot more time to launch a coordinated rescue attempt versus crews trying to jump in because they realize the person has 10 minutes of meaningful movement. So I think that's a great point, Fred. And I don't know, Jason or Darren, do you know if any of your crew members or people you work with in the industry are aware of that cold water boot camp training?
I'm not. I just wrote it down. I'll be looking at it after we get off this phone call.
Yeah. Is that familiar to you, Jason? I don't know if you've...
It's not, no, I'm sorry,
Okay, so I think actually, Fred, I don't know if you shared the link in the chat, but I think you did, or somebody did. Anyway, so we could share that with people on the call. I think another question was, is the demographic and experience profile of Bristol Bay Reserve fishermen the same as for the almost 1,000 other boats? What about the history of fatality risk from man overboard among BBR fishermen versus others? So I'm not sure what the feedback is about.
Katie, you want to take that? You probably have a better sense of that than we do.
I will try to answer this question. I may need a little bit more clarification. Sorry, are you asking about like other fisheries or this fishery compared to other fisheries? I will say that, oh, go ahead.
It seems to me that the question is how representative is Bristol Bay Reserve when compared to other fisheries?
Yeah, Bristol Bay is pretty unique, but I think that as far as the mentality of seeing other people wearing PFDs is probably the best, one of the best ways to get any fishery to increase their participation. I spoke with a few people that participate in other fisheries to kind of gauge their opinions on the use of PFDs and sorry, let me back up. We manage 3 marine insurance pools here. So Bristol Bay Reserve is one. We also manage a pool, Southeast Alaska Fishermen's Alliance Reserve and Seine Vessel Reserve. So we work with many different types of operations, and the vessel size, the number of crew, all of that seems to greatly impact people's outlooks on not only the use of PFDs in general, but the type of PFDs that they would consider using if they're not using them already. I'll just give 2 quick examples. I spoke with someone who is a gillnet. They operate in a gillnet fishery in Southeast Alaska. It's just the vessel operator and her husband, and they have no interest in really wearing PFDs. And a big part of that is the cost. And the other part of that, they have serious entanglement concerns. I don't know, to be honest, when the last time they went in and tried on a bunch of different PFDs. So some of it could be related to just the education. But I know that for that fishery, they're much less profitable than Bristol Bay. So the cost is really important. And then in other fisheries with larger vessels, I think that the concern of falling overboard, I mean, here we're based in Seattle, the Puget Sound Seine vessels, I spoke with a couple operators, and they just don't have a concern of their crew falling overboard unless they're operating the skiff. So they'll have their skiff operators, which is like a smaller boat, they'll have them wear a PFD, but they really don't see a huge need to force all the rest of their crew to be wearing PFDs at all times. Hope that answers that question.
That's great. Thanks, Katie. I think so. It sounds like there is some differences in different fisheries, but I think there's another great question here from Ted about whether the folks in Bristol Bay have heard anything from the fishermen about the performance of the PFD that you had chosen to feature as part of your initiative. Do people like it? Do they have suggestions for design improvements that we could share with manufacturers? Or maybe you've already shared some improvement ideas with manufacturers.
If I could start on this one, I have not shared any suggestion with manufacturers. I received one comment that the member who purchased this PFD, they liked the size and it was comfortable, but they were nervous about using the hydrostatic, I think I'm saying that right, that tablet without having replacements. And each of these units came with a guide on how to maintain each PFD. And when I looked online to try and buy these tablets and the maintenance kits, I couldn't find them. So I did actually contact Seattle Marine. So I take that back. I did contact Seattle Marine and ask them to stock the maintenance kits, but that's the most feedback that I've received so far. What about you, maybe Darren?
Yeah, and Chris, you can correct me here, but I think one of the things that we found was that to keep the cost down, the old Mustang horse collar with the hydrostatic was generally more expensive, and these are salt tablets, correct, or some dissolvable unit that allows it to trigger when it gets wet, and that allowed the cost substantially to become less. And we tried some, or at least I did, and they seemed to work relatively well. There was concern about, well, if I get it wet or damp, will it? And it does not seem to deploy. I had friends that had it, get wet in their skiff in water, and it worked like it was supposed to. So that's the one thing that I think we were dealing with, was keeping cost affordable on them. And those units seem to be the best for the dollar in construction and utility as well.
I think this might be a good time for me to interject one of my own questions, which was, so when we trialed various PFD designs in the Northeast, we tried to incorporate a variety of options. So we had inherent flotation built into some designs that we offered, manual deployment of the flotation, and then some with hydrostatic components. And I think one of the things that we were worried about is for those PFDs where you either have to manually deploy the life jacket or PFD, or if it was hydrostatic, how would those be rearmed? And how do you check to make sure that the PFD is functioning correctly? So I don't know, did Bristol Bay have a conversation internally about, is there a local commercial marine supplier that has the skill set to rearm devices? What complications might fishermen run into if they do need to get them rearmed? Has that come up?
We didn't discuss that as a group. I don't think it's, Darren or Jason, do you have any? I don't recall discussing that as a group. It's certainly worth talking about, but I think our main goal was to get units that we thought would be comfortable, affordable, and get them in as many hands as we could, as quickly as we could.
Yeah, I think you're right, Katie, and if you have any different recollection, Darren, but I think our emphasis is really just to get the program up and running. And so some of the nuances of the details like you're talking about, we might have just passed over simply just to move forward with a sense of urgency. I can't remember how early we started this conversation prior to that, whatever season was, but it was like, let's make this happen as quickly as we can, was really the primary focus.
Yeah, I'll also say, I mean, when I did receive the inquiry about, hey, where do I get these replacement tablets? I contacted Seattle Marine and they immediately stocked them in, I don't know about every single one of their locations, but they made them available at the location in Bristol Bay in Naknek, and also available online, which they previously were not easy to find. And then, you know, our program, we do a lot of stuff here, so we just don't have a lot of the staff time to give we don't have a lot more staff time to give this program, unfortunately. I wish that we did, but we're a small office and we pretty much just did the best that we could, I think.
Yeah, well, hey, and I think it's, you know what, we are completely on your page. I think we ended up saying, let's just get them on there and get people thinking about them and wearing them, and then we can address the other issues. But I think just to follow up on your comment, it may be a great discussion for a future international PFD call is to talk about that question of rearming life jackets, how to make that process simple for fishermen, and how just to you know, provide reminders to the fishing community that are wearing them that good to check it, and this is how you check it, and this is how you can rearm it. So maybe a topic for a future discussion. We have a few more minutes for another question. Let's see here. Are the locator devices on the PFD similar to transponders used by skiers for locating them under an avalanche? I'm not sure you guys have locator devices in the yeah. So Bob, I don't know if you want to take yourself off mute, and maybe I'm not doing justice to your question. But
yeah, I thought when a person fell overboard, they could locate them by a device on the PFD. Or maybe I misunderstood that.
Not on these. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I may have created some confusion out there. What I was speaking to in my remarks was the fact that you do have personal locator beacons that are available for putting on PFDs, but it's, number one, it's not a requirement, and I think that is probably not a lot of those devices out there. More important is probably just the personal the light that comes on the PFD that can help you spot somebody. But
would a locator be too expensive to include in PFDs, you think?
I think those units are a couple $100 if I'm not mistaken. So if the
300,
yeah, that was the number I was thinking of too. So if you've got a life jacket that retails for $280 something, and then a personal locator, you know, beacon, that could be a lot of money depending on the operation. For some operations, it's not, but I haven't, you know, I think that's actually something that the National Transportation Safety Board is currently engaging with the Coast Guard on, is whether to mandate personal locator beacons as part of the survival suit or PFD package. But that's a request from NTSB, and I'm not sure that the Coast Guard is on board with that at this point.
Thank you.
I would just add very quickly, I think the idea of a personal locator beacon with regards to the added cost of the package would be a really hard sell in Bristol Bay, only because the vast majority of our time is spent in fairly close proximity to other vessels. We're rarely operating where we don't have line of sight with another vessel that's close by. So somebody falling overboard, granted, we are operating at night, but we're operating, you know, over the summer solstice. So it's rare that we have real dark conditions, but the idea of somebody falling overboard in a situation that somebody couldn't get line of sight onto that person is in the minority of time that we have there. So I think it would be a hard sell if we started throwing out personal locator devices with the PFDs.
I'd also comment on here, you know, space is a big issue. You know, if you see a couple of those pictures, they're wearing the horse collars underneath their rain gear, and they're taking those on and off depending upon the day several times. And the bulkiness of them that I've seen of the PLBs are bigger. If they got them smaller, that'd be one thing. But I agree with Jason. I think that that would be a larger step for us as a group to get people to sign on to. Not that I don't think there's merit to it, but that's kind of where we're at on it as a group.
Yeah. Well, and I think that underscores a point that every fishery is different and maybe sees the risk differently and sees the value of that differently. So a tailored approach is sometimes the best. We're at 11:55, and I just wanted to take a moment to highlight some of the comments, which are just high five to all of you for taking on this initiative and doing a terrific job getting life jackets out there, accessible and affordable to fishermen, which is a big part. I think we're asking them to change behavior. If we can meet people halfway, it just makes a lot of sense. So yeah, thanks to all of you for joining and sharing your experiences with the initiative. I think the other thing I wanted to point out before we end our call today is that we host these quarterly meetings and hope to do so into 2022, and it would be great if folks on the call had any ideas for future topics or future speakers. If you could reach out to Rebecca Weil and share your ideas with her, she'll follow up and see if we can get anyone you've recommended to agree to join us to do a presentation. And if you have any other just general suggestions for format, I don't know if people like the combination of presentation and then time for questions and follow-up, but if you have ideas for how we might change the format of these quarterly meetings, please let us know. And then anything else we can do to make this a rewarding experience, just reach out and share your thoughts. Let's see, Rebecca's email address is in the chat bar, and then so you can just use that to reach out to her with your ideas. And then I think I don't know, Jennifer or Beck, did you guys, either of you, have any last minute things to add?
Just thank the Bristol Bay Reserve for tackling this. I know it's a lot of work. I hear it's a small staff and that you did the very best you could, and I think you did a great job. So, bravo. Thanks for giving it a try, and hope that it can continue at some point in the future.
I would just echo what Jennifer said. It's really great to hear this story and how exciting. I know we went and asked a bunch of insurance companies to see if they could help us when we were doing our PFD campaign. And they all at the time said in 2016, 2017, they said they didn't have the margin to do that, to offer a discount. And I just think you guys leading the way on that sort of thing. And I know Fred Matera's group has done some insurance work too. I think having companies say, we're going to give this benefit to our members, is really important, and I'm just hoping there's some way to help use the work you've done to spread that around to other places and have that sort of benefit offered. It's very exciting. So thank you for all your time today on sharing that.
Yeah, and Katie, you had mentioned, we're a small office, we can't do everything. And I think that's where I would encourage you guys to spread the word in the fishing community that you have so many people. Look at all the people on this call who are dedicated to this, and that's what we do. So don't be afraid to reach out and say, hey, we need you guys to tackle this, or we need you to help us address this. You're not alone, and we're here to do what we can to support you guys in your efforts. So put us to work and demand more from us. That's, yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes. So I guess I think that pretty much wraps up today's call. Thanks to all the folks who just joined to listen in. And again, please share your topic ideas, your presenter ideas, and let us know if you're willing to share your organization's web link on iFish. All right, well, be well, and best to all our fishermen on the call. Hope you have a good season.
Right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye.
Thank you all.